Hey folks, today we're covering Developer Diary 2, Government, Politics and Estates for Europa Universalis 5. Similar to last week, this dev diary is going to go into the basics of these three systems. If you have been following the Tinto Talk series, you probably know most of the information that's in here, but if you haven't, if you're new to the series, if you've not played EU4 even, this is going to be a very good primer, I guess, into how some of the core systems of EU5 work. So as they say here, this is going to show us the systems that are the building blocks of your realm. And then as they say here, their vision for EU5 is to move beyond flat mechanics and instead create a living world where choices matter, from balancing societal values, they're going to cover those later on in this dev diary, managing parliamentary debates or keeping your estate satisfied, and navigating diplomatic intrigue. They've built all these systems so you can guide your nation through triumphs and crises alike. So obviously when you're playing the game, it isn't always a smooth run. There's going to be things that happen, rebellions, different events, things like that are going to cause you to have to think about what you're doing, how you're playing, and how you want to change your nation in your campaign so it plays out that little bit differently. And they're going to start here talking about the crown. This is very important. If you're coming from like Crusader Kings, where you play as an individual, it's more role-playing game. This you are playing as the crown, like the ruler of a nation. You're like the god above a nation, controlling everything. You're not playing, as they say here, as the king of France directly. You're playing as France. So that's how you've got to kind of get your head around how this game plays. If you've not played Europa Universalis before, it is a little bit different how you look at the game versus like Crusader Kings or something like that. So as they say here, every nation starts with a unique government type, that is monarchies, theocracies, republic, horde, or tribal systems. There's even some other ones as well. Each of these has its own mechanics designed to reflect their strengths, struggles, and flavor. For instance, monarchies lean into dynasties and royal marriages to secure succession, while republics engage in a constant dance of elections. You can see a very nice map here showing Europe at the beginning of the game. The monarchies, you can see some tribals still up there in Ireland, the republics of Italy and elsewhere, and then some other kinds as well, kind of hidden off to the right-hand side of the map. So governments aren't static either. Over the course of your campaign, you will see your nation evolve in response to both internal and external factors. A monarchy might transform into a revolutionary republic, or a landless minor Japanese clan could even rise up to claim the mantle of the shogun. Tied closely into all of this is the new character system. Characters represent different estates of your nation and play active roles in shaping your government. You can see that here in the cabinet action screen. Select a character to put to work. So you'll pick one of these characters, put him in your cabinet, and based on his stats, he's going to do well in that role, not well in that role. Also, this is used for getting commanders, admirals, even rulers ultimately in some campaigns. As a monarchy, you'll guide your ruling dynasty, with some characters rising to the throne, others leading your armies, or being pieces of the diplomatic strategies through royal marriages. You can marry them off, inherit other lands, all that kind of stuff you could do in previous games. So you can see an example of this here. This is the crown prince. Who do you want to marry him to? Well, in this case, I'm going to marry him to France. Maybe I can get my dynasty onto the throne of France ultimately. And then also getting alliances, things like that can be a little bit easier as well if you do this. So you can pick whoever you want, play it out different ways if you do want to do so. The next thing they're going to cover is the cabinet. The primary way to utilize your characters is through the cabinet. The cabinet in EU5 is a team of advisors, nobles, diplomats, generals, or scholars appointed to manage key tasks of the realm. Your cabinet is crucial on how you build your nation, and you can assign an advisor to promote societal values, develop provinces, increase control, integrate newly conquered lands, or influence other gameplay aspects. Each cabinet member possesses a unique set of abilities and attributes to improve the efficiency of the task at hand, and each cabinet action relies on one specific ability. So you can see that in the next screenshot. This is the cabinet. You can see on the left-hand side that like cross swords icon. That means this ability is focused on martial things. So in that case, it is looking for that martial skill. As you can see, 96, 97, they're going to be very good at integrating these areas or strengthening the government. The one below that, the paper-looking icon, that is the character's admin skill, and you can see that he has 99 admin, so he's very good at this. As you can see, developing this area, plus 102%. So you're looking for these characters that have really good stats, put them in these areas, and they make those cabinet actions even better than they would be usually. It is a choice, though. You wouldn't necessarily always put your strongest person here, because the estate they are linked to gets more powerful if they hold cabinet positions. They'll talk about that later on under the estate section, but it is something that not necessarily you will always choose the best person. If you have a particularly strong estate, you might not put another person from that estate into your cabinet. For example, with this system, developing a province requires admin ability, obstructing rebels uses military abilities. The abilities of your current ruler also will influence the efficiency of your cabinet, allowing you to tailor your cabinet to the strengths of your nation or compensate for the weaknesses in your nation. Among the cabinet members, you can also appoint one to serve as the cabinet's representative as the head of the cabinet, granting them additional efficiency bonuses. You can see this here. Head of the cabinet. This character is the head of your cabinet. The character receives the following bonuses. Cannot be removed from cabinet, yes. So once you put them there, I guess they're kind of stuck there. So you're going to have to be careful who you choose. The efficiency of the cabinet plus 25%, so that's why you would want to have this. Cannot lead armies or navies. Obviously, they're busy running things. They're not going to be running the army as well. And then is head of the cabinet? Obviously, yes, because that's the role they are playing. The overall efficiency of the cabinet can also play a role into how well your cabinet does its tasks, impacted by cultures, laws, advances, and much, much more in the game. You can see an example of this here. This is in 1337 in Japan, and you can see their cabinet efficiency is 20% due to meritocracy, royal court, royal marriage rights, religious advisory council, these different things that are affecting it, and then that is giving you that 20%. Next, they're going to show us what it looks like in 1784, so much more late game. You can see in this example, it is 80% efficiency, and the rights of man, meritocracy, rise of the great individuals, all these different advances, and then the other bonuses below that as well. So as you progress through the game, it's very likely this is going to get better and better. I guess there are some reasons where it wouldn't happen, but for the most part, as you progress through, as you get those advances, like look at rights of man, 20% just from that, which is pretty crazy. That's as much as the whole previous one was giving. So you can see as you progress through the game, you are gradually getting better at this. I guess if you don't pick them up for whatever reason, it would affect you as well. The next thing they're going to cover is societal values. This system is a standout feature, bringing back the policy sliders from earlier EU games. These sliders represent opposing ideals where your nation sits on a slider and will have direct mechanical impact in your game. And then they're going to show us some examples of these. So these are similar to the national ideas, I think they were called in EU4, where you would pick certain ones. In this game, it's more of a slider, as they've said. You work towards one area or you go the other way. You can't pick up like centralized and decentralized in the same campaign. You are one or the other, and depending on what you do, it will affect you on this slider. They're going to show you an example of this here. Centralization, societal value, and as you can see, this gives you crown power plus 50%, maximum war exhaustion plus 3, proximity costs minus 10%, counter-espionage plus 30%, and then control importance modifier 0.2. A centralized country is more efficient, while a decentralized country is more resilient. And these do scale depending on how far on that slider you are. So I guess this one might be maxed out at 100 for centralization. The next one they're going to show us is decentralization. I'll actually put these next to each other so you can see the difference here. So this is obviously a decentralized government, a state satisfaction equilibrium plus 2.5%, maximum war exhaustion minus 3, which is actually really good. So you might want to pick this up if you're doing a lot of warfare. Having that minus 3 is actually really good for you. Counter-espionage minus 30% because your government is more spaced out, so it's easier for people to spy on you, I guess. Monthly rebel growth, 0.10%, and then the control importance modifier, 0.10. So as you can see, some of these are directly opposite to centralization, but some of them are different bonuses as well. So in some campaigns, you might be leaning into a crown power game, I guess kind of centralizing everything as the name goes. So you might want to lean into that. Maybe in another campaign, even playing as the same country, you might think, I'm going to do a lot of warfare, so let's pick up that maximum war exhaustion to minus 3. That is going to help me do a lot more wars, and then I might want to switch this later on if I do decide to do so. So you're not always going to play the same way. They are going to show us some more examples of this as we go through the dev diary though. And then next, they're going to quickly talk about some changes they've made due to our feedback in the Tinto talks around Islam. So no longer is piety a currency, instead a value bar representing mysticism and jurisprudence, swinging in either direction depending on the factors such as estate privileges and events. So this is where they've moved it away from being like mana points just for Islamic countries and brought it into the societal value system, which I think is a much better way to go. This system is much better. It's a lot more kind of reactive to what you're doing. It isn't just spending mana points to get things. You actually have to change how your country's playing to get things moving in this direction. You do get events and advances that do push it in one direction, but also depending on what you're doing in your campaigns will naturally move you one way or another. You know, if you're an inward-looking nation, if you're playing tall maybe, you will naturally move further down that system. If you then start expanding, building colonies, doing a lot of diplomacy, things like that, you're naturally going to move further into outward leaning. and that's going to push you further and further into that, picking up those bonuses and helping you move into that kind of gameplay as well. So you can see here, mysticism, societal value. When mysticism is dominant, it scales up, and you can see here, plus 10% clergy estate satisfaction equilibrium, army morale plus 10%, pop conversion speed plus 10%. If you go the other way towards jurisprudence, you can see the clergy estate satisfaction equilibrium, again, plus 10%. I guess they just love it either way. Monthly research progress, plus 10%. Efficiency of our cabinet, plus 10% as well. So again, depending on what you're trying to do, maybe jurisprudence, if you're doing more of an internal game, you think you're not going to be doing much warfare in the near term, you'll move towards that. But then mysticism kind of looks like it helps you with conquering places and then converting those people as well. So again, depending on what you're doing in your campaign, will change how you play it. And if you want to see how this looks on screen, you can see that here now. So you can see the top one there, that's more focused around China, and then the bottom one, absolutism towards liberalism. And as you can see, you have that bar and you move left or right on it, depending on which one you want to move towards, or even if you don't want to move towards it, things might push you in that direction. And then your modifiers scale depending on how far along that bar you are. And then as they say here, your nation begins with progress on these sliders, reflecting its historical context, but you can shift them by assigning cabinet members or enacting policies within laws. As I said, there's a bunch of areas where you can modify this and try moving it the other way. I will say though, it is a slow process. It isn't very easy to move from one side to another. It's not as easy as just pressing the other side and you will immediately move in that direction. You can select it and it will slowly move you in that direction. But obviously, if you're then taking decisions, having laws and policies that would move you in the other direction, that will counteract what you're trying to do with your societal values. So it is a balancing act as to what you want to do and then how things affect you as you're just naturally playing the game as well. And then as I say here, your estate privileges will often come at the cost of monthly progress on a societal value, as the newfound power of these estates shapes the lives of your population. For instance, and you can see this on the screen now, granting the burghers building rights will decrease your building costs, but your societal value will shift monthly towards the plutocracy value. And you can see that, as I said on the screen, building cost is minus 5%, but then you are giving up your control over this societal value. It is moving in the direction that the burghers like, so you have to weigh up if that's what you want to do. In this example, though, they need to make the burghers happy, so they might want to give this away to them, make them that little bit happier, and then prevent like a rebellion or something like that. Something else that would be much worse, and then maybe you can counteract that change anyway with some other laws or something like that. And speaking of laws, they're going to talk about that next. So the next thing is laws in EU5, and they are fundamental to shaping your nation's future as they dictate your country's functions. Laws are categorized into different areas such as religious laws, military laws, estate laws, and many, many more. Each law category can contain many different laws which are composed of various policies to pick from. If you have been following the Tinto flavors and the Tinto talks, you've seen many examples of these. So if you are new to the game, do go back and watch a couple of my videos, because a lot of these different law things are covered every week. The one that we just had around colonization covered how you can change this to affect your colonies. There's a bunch of different ways this comes into your campaign and how you will play out as the realm you are playing as. Policies are the enabling mechanics connected to a law. The different policies within a law will have different effects, such as impacting societal values or changing the satisfaction of estates. So you can see the example here, assign an admin law policy, and then the top thing here is the law. So this is administrative system, feudal administration is the current policy within that. And then you can see the list here of the different ones that you might want to choose. There's absolute rulership, autonomous councils, central council, confederation union, federal state, and you will pick one of these to be active within your realm. So again, you can see the different bonuses depending on what you're trying to do. Some of these are moving towards decentralization, some of them are moving towards centralization, some of them even move you towards aristocracy or the other way as well. So you can change these depending on what you're trying to do again in your campaign, what you're getting up to. Maybe you have some problems uniquely in that campaign that you're going to have to change this to counteract it. Or maybe you just want to play your realm that little bit differently. Maybe you want to play in England with autonomous councils, and then next time you play, oh, maybe I want to play with absolute rulership. Who would want to do that as England? As the game progresses through the ages, you will encounter new laws and also new policies linked to previous laws. Changing a policy within a law can create a huge uproar, so generally it's better to gain parliamentary backing for such a change. They're going to talk about the parliament later on in this dev diary. So you can see in this example, select unitary administration. This will cost you 66 stability, which is a lot of stability. Again, if you're coming from EU4, you've not seen any dev diaries around this. It isn't a number between -3 and +3. I think that's what it was in EU4. It is now up to 100 and -100. So this is costing you a lot. Even if you've maxed out stability, it is costing you a lot of stability to do this, but you can go through the parliamentary system and get a reduction in this. Again, they're going to cover that in a second. The next thing they're going to talk about is government reforms. Government reforms represent the true backbone of your nation's political structure. They also represent the way your state organizes and evolves politically, societally, and administratively over time. They are structured progression which reflects how your government has adapted to changing circumstances. Many nations in EU5 start with flavoured governments, such as the Anatolian Muslims. They start with Anatolian Beylik reform, and the Castilians with the Crown of Castile, the French with French feudal nobility. They also showed off Portugal has Portuguese monarchy, special versions of this. So there are like the vanilla versions, and then some realms have special versions as well for them to make them that little bit more flavourful. And yes, even in the base game, before the DLC comes, there's a lot of this flavour in the game already. You can see an example of this here, the Anatolian Beylik, and you can see this is a government reform. The modifiers for this one is unjust war on the same religion cost minus 25%, possible government reforms +1, cabinet seats +1, that's a very important one. The more cabinet members you have, the more you can do in your realm, the more you can specialise certain things as well. And then non-culture levy size +25%, really leaning into what happened historically with this realm and allowing you to see that in your campaigns in EU5. You can see another one here, the Crown of Castile, change policy costs minus 25%, manpower +10%, monthly legitimacy 0.05, monthly progress towards aristocracy 0.10. So as you can see for this one, this is built into Castile at the start, and if you don't want to go towards aristocracy, I mean, why wouldn't you want to do that as Castile? But if you didn't want to, you would have to try revoke this or really counteract it to move away from aristocracy if you were wanting to mix it up a little bit, like an alternate history Castile or something like that. And then one of the other ones they mentioned, French feudal nobility. This is a government reform, the same as the previous ones. Culture capacity +2, diplomatic capacity +4, because France, at the beginning of this game, is very fractured. Monthly progress towards aristocracy 0.10, monthly progress towards serfdom 0.2. So again, leaning into historically what was happening in France at this time. You can revoke this. It is very expensive to do so you're not going to be doing that very easily. But if you did want to, you can revoke this and then move to something else if you did wish to do so. The next thing they're going to show is some reforms available to you as France. You can see here agricultural cultivation, diplomatic traditions, enforced religious adherence, trade office network, and then also autocracy as well at the bottom. And again, these all give modifiers that lean into whatever they are themed around. So obviously the religious ones, religious modifiers for the most part, trade, obviously giving you trade bonuses as well. Reforms are deeply linked into your societal values, laws, and the influence of your estates. Some government reforms are locked behind requirements such as societal value alignment. For example, the religious tolerance reform requires the country to have humanist societal values, whilst the bank ledgers reform requires a capital economy. This is one of the things, I've kind of talked about it already in this Dev Diary coverage, but I've talked about this all the way through EU5's development. This really is a game where you can play as the same country and really play out a totally different campaign depending on what you're trying to do. You can play as a tall Scotland, you can play as a wide Scotland, you could play as a religious Scotland, you could play as a non-religious Scotland. There's all these different ways, and as they say here, certain things are locked behind these different societal values, and it isn't, as I said earlier, as easy as just pressing different ones and going, oh, I want to be a capital economy now, I just press that, oh, I am that now. You have to move your whole nation slowly towards that, kind of like turning a big ship around. It isn't as easy as you think. You're going to have to slowly do this, get to these different societal values, and then implement these bonuses as well. And then obviously when you move the other way, you're going to have to mix things up depending on what you're trying to do. So you can see one of the examples they just talked about here. This is religious tolerance, tolerance of heretical beliefs +1, tolerance of heathen beliefs +1, monthly progress towards humanist and communalism 0.10. So as they said, you already need to be towards humanist to implement this, but then once you do implement it, you're going to move even further towards humanist, kind of really maxing that out. So then it's very, very hard to move back the other way if you do wish to do so. There's also some major reforms that shape the form of your nation and as such are limited, making them very important choices which will change how you will build your nation if it is a republic or a kingdom. You can see this here, institute reform, dynastic signoria. This is noble levy size, replace cabinet member cost reductions, monthly prestige, estate enrichment, possible government reforms, and then you could do the normal signoria. So very different to the previous one. It isn't dynastic. It's more of a voting one, less of the same dynasty is going to get in there. And that is crown power minus 10%. So it isn't dynastic. So obviously the crown does lose power. Replace cabinet member costs minus 10%. Improve relations is plus 10%. Monthly progress towards decentralization plus 0.10. So again, it makes sense here. You're not having that dynastic change. So in this example, that would lead towards decentralization because the same family isn't always in charge. It's getting spread out a little bit. Obviously, people could vote for the same dynasty and things like that, but that is kind of leaning in that direction if you did choose that one. Enacting a reform is not something that you can benefit from instantly, but like laws, the time depends on your admin efficiency. So again, you implement this, and depending on your efficiency is how quick it will take to implement. There are several unique government reforms, both major and minor, attached to individual countries, cultures, religions, and events. This will allow you to have a deeper level of personalization based on your campaigns. Again, what I was just saying, there's so many different ways you can play this out. Maybe in one game, you're a Catholic Scotland. In the next one, you convert some other random religion, and then you get bonuses based on that instead of Catholicism. So yeah, there's just so many ways. And why am I picking on Scotland? Well, many moons ago, I released a 30 minutes of EU5 when I got to play the game when it was initially announced, and I did play as Scotland, so that's why I always lean into that. A little bit anyway, it's the one I've got the most experience of. The next thing they're going to talk about is estates directly. So estates are the social pillars of your nation. Most commonly, they are nobles, clergy, burghers, and commoners, although some do have special ones. And then a lot of these also have unique names and unique estates as well. These estates represent the different societal groups within your nation and are directly tied to the elements of your population. Each estate has its own agenda, its own money, and its own buildings, and keeping them happy will give you bonuses like better trade or better research. You can see the government tab here looking quite nice now. I think the UI has moved on quite a bit, but we won't get sidetracked by that. I have done a separate video around the UI for this game. But you can see this is showing the country, the ruler, and then the different estates below. So this is crown, nobility, clergy, burghers, and commoners. As they said, some realms have additional estates. Some of them have unique names that are more flavorful for that realm that you're playing as. You can see how powerful they are. That's that like lightning bolt symbol. You can see the population obviously below the crown, because the crown is just one person obviously, but below that you can see the population of the different estates. You can see, as I said, how powerful they are. You can see the privileges that they have. Those are those little icons below them. And then on the right hand side, that's where you can add additional reforms if you have the ability to. And then that coin icon, that's where you can bribe them. You can see the satisfaction, how happy they are. Well, you can bribe them with a lot of money if you need a short boost to that, and that will boost their satisfaction. Again, a very short boost. They talked about that in a recent dev diary, and you're not going to be doing that very often. But if you need to, you can give them some money, and that makes everyone happy, doesn't it? In the next screenshot, they're going to show us some estate privileges. So the first one here is Abrahamic communities, and this is clergy estate satisfaction equilibrium minus 2.5%, tolerance of heathen beliefs plus 1, population conversion speed minus 100%. So you're not going to be doing this if you want to convert people too much. Unrest minus 10%. And as you can see, it's going to cost nearly 7 stability to revoke this. You might want to do that if you're trying to convert people now. You might want to try revoke this privilege. You will lose some happiness from them if you do that. And obviously the other bonuses as well. But maybe you are trying to convert people, so you'll try revoke this and then get on with that as well. Neglecting your estates will lead to penalties represented by negative modifiers or even rebellions. Unlike previous games, the estates are a fundamental mechanic, and that is why their satisfaction levels are always visible in the UI at the top of the screen. You can see that example on the screen now. You can see the ruler, the flag, yes. I know many of you want the flag to be on the left-hand side and a lot bigger. Maybe not even see your ruler, but that is how it looks at the moment. And then you can see those different estates along the top. As you can see, if you're very eagle-eyed, there is a 5th one here if you are playing as China. They covered that in a previous dev diary if you are interested. Estate happiness and power are heavily dependent on the privileges you grant them and the laws that you have enacted. Some privileges within one estate may also oppose the power of a different estate. For instance, like they introduced last week, if you grant free movement rights to the commoner's estate, they will gain bonuses, but it will also annoy the nobility, who will prefer a more strict serfdom. They did cover that in last week's developer diary. If you have missed that, it is on the channel if you want to go back and watch it. But you can see it again here, free mobility of the common people, and this allows peasants and labourers to migrate. But as you can see, the nobles not too happy about this, minus 5%, and then monthly progress towards free subjects, 0.10, because you are freeing up your serfs, letting them do different things. The nobles, again, not too happy about that. They want to have full control over people. I'm glad we've moved so far from that in our modern day lives. You can empower estates by granting them privileges where they can exchange some of your crown power for a tangible benefit for the estate. In return, you will gain loyalty through happiness, as well as their political and domestic support. For example, a local clergy will improve your nation's research output, but in addition to the power gained from the privilege, this will also influence the societal value, as well as the happiness of other estates. You can see this here, the current satisfaction of the clergy. Currently it is 63%, monthly change is 0. That is because the satisfaction equilibrium is the same amount. So if you're new to the system, you have this equilibrium. That is where it's always trying to get back to. So if you're over 63%, it will always gradually try and move you down back to it. If you're down, if you're at like 40%, it will gradually try and move you back up to 63%. That equilibrium number is going to be different all the time in all your different campaigns, but it will change as you make decisions and it will move in specific ways. And as you can see, because they are happy at the moment, they're at what they should be, it is giving you monthly research progress 6.9% and diplomatic reputation 0.27. So if you try and move this higher and higher, you will get those bonuses. But obviously, if they're very happy, it probably means another estate is not as happy because you're kind of leaning towards one of them rather than a different one. And then, as I said, the estate system is integral to everything that you do, and estates hold voting power in Parliament, where the importance of their votes depend on their current power and satisfaction. And what are parliaments? I'm glad you asked. They're going to cover that next. So parliaments, the parliament system in EU5 is a dynamic and essential part of your government, available to nations that have laws enabling it, a large amount of which are in the game. It is going to be very hard to play as a realm that doesn't have a parliament. Yes, we won't get sidetracked into why does most realms have a parliament in this game. It's just how they had to do it at launch. Well, I guess how they decided to do it for launch anyway. In addition to the bonus system, the Parliament is here to show the complexity of politics and will make you choose how many concessions you're willing to give up to get what you want. So you can see here, call parliaments. This will call a parliament in an attempt to get support to resolve a parliament issue, change policies in our laws, create casus belli, raising higher taxes or larger levies. So this is how you can get casus belli. If you've seen anything about this game, it is a lot harder to blob at the beginning of the game as the majority of the realms. There are certain realms that can blob quite easily, but you do have to go to Parliament in most cases and say, hey, I want to attack France. Can we do that? And then you have to give some concessions because generally maybe they've got other things they want to do and they don't want to go to war, so you're going to have to bribe them a little bit. Well, not bribe them, obviously. Give them concessions again. It's not always bribery. You can do it in other ways if you want to. As you can see as well here, you can choose to hold your parliament in your capital, but you can actually choose to host it wherever you like, and it does give you different bonuses if you do that. If you always host in your capital, you get centralization movement. If you host it out into the wilds of your realm, which will give you decentralized bonuses. So as I've said all the way through this, even your minor choices in different areas of the game are going to affect those societal values they talked about earlier and really shape how your realm is going to act and how it's going to play out in your campaigns. So the composition and influence of your parliament is directly tied to your estates. Each estate can potentially hold voting power in parliament, and its individual votes depend on its current power and satisfaction. So your commoners, probably the biggest part of your population, but they very likely have no power, so it doesn't matter what they think. Who would have thought? And they aren't going to influence much of your nation. Some realms, your nobles will be very powerful. Some of them, it'll be your burghers. Some religious realms, your religious side is going to be the most powerful one. And you're going to have to lean into helping them a little bit more to get those votes through Parliament. I will say as well, your Parliament can be called every 5 years. So you can't just spam this. Every 5 years you can do it and then bring in these ideas. Make these changes if you can do so. A powerful and satisfied nobility, for example, will have a significant vote in parliamentary debates, potentially pushing through reforms that align with their interests and not somebody else's. So you can see an example of this here. Promote noble officers. Selecting this issue will add 76% to the Parliament support as the nobility is backing this issue. So if you're trying to do something else, you can do this, and then that will move their support into you. So you're giving away this issue, but maybe you're picking up something else that you want. Or some of these are kind of mutually beneficial. Like this one isn't too bad. Noble estate satisfaction equilibrium plus 25% while this issue is being debated. So when it's not debated any further, that will go down. But if you temporarily really need the nobles to be happier, you can implement this and they'll be happier whilst your parliament is talking. So that might prevent a rebellion or something like that. But to do this, if it does fail, you will lose 7 stability in your realm. Conversely, an unhappy or disempowered estate will have less sway, but its discontent might manifest in other ways, less desirable ways, such as rebellions, things like that. Apart from rebellions and negative modifiers they've mentioned earlier, a powerful but unhappy estate can also ask for an unwashed bribe in exchange for their support in parliament. So again, you can bribe them temporarily to try get them to pass things that you want. And then as they've hinted towards here, they've covered this in previous dev diaries as well, you will have these estates, and depending on their satisfaction and their power, it does affect things. So if you have a very unhappy burghers, they're not going to give you as much help in trade and things like that. So it is a balancing act. Depending on which ones you want to be happy, powerful, all these different factors you're going to have to take into account as you are doing your campaigns. Across the world, there are multiple types of parliament. Again, there is like the base version of a parliament, and then different flavorful ones. And as I said earlier, you have to call them every couple of years, but this can be different. But this is where your estates can be heard, come to you and say, hey, we want these things, or you could call the Parliament to try get things that you're after. The last thing they're going to talk about is crown power. So let's talk about the very essence of your role in EU5, the crown power. This isn't a resource like manpower or diplomatic power in previous games, but rather an overall concept that represents your authority and your ability to influence your nation. But as you can see in the next screenshot, crown power, this is the estate power of the ruler. Political power is 480 due to, and then you can see all these different modifiers here, the population, high legitimacy, royal court, traditional distribution, ruler's admin ability. So that is a very important one. If you have a dum-dum in charge of your realm, it is going to cause you some problems. And then the estate power of the crown in this example is below 25%. So if you're not very powerful as the ruler, you can see this does affect your realm. So changing policies, tax efficiency, efficiency of your cabinet, diplomatic reputation, things that you can imagine. If you are seen as a weak ruler, this would be how it would affect your realm. Trade income though, plus 20%, because I guess like the traders don't really see you as powerful. So they're just doing whatever they want, but that could help you in some ways. Estate satisfaction from destroying estate buildings, minus 3%. So again, if you're seen as a weak ruler, if you go around destroying buildings in a tantrum, they're not going to be happy about it. And then Parliament base support though, plus 10%. Again, I guess they're seeing you as so weak, they're like, sure, we'll help you out. It doesn't really matter, we're in charge, not so much for you. Crown power is deeply linked into everything they've discussed so far in this dev diary. Your government type, the effectiveness of your cabinet and its composition, the balance of your societal values, the laws you enact, and crucially, your relationship with the estates and their privileges. At the beginning of the game, your crown power may be weak, and you may see estates such as the nobles basically running your country, but as you advance through the ages, you'll get more tools to strengthen your rule as absolutism starts to take control once again. So you can see here, absolute rulership. This is an advance in the age of absolutism. Who would have thought? Crown power plus 50%. Obviously, implement this, you can have a good old time as a ruler. High crown power also allows you to change policies, manage estates, and handle crises better, but a low crown power can also make managing and ruling of your nation much more difficult. When you fall below 25% crown power, you will experience increased stability costs for changing policies, a reduction in tax efficiency, and a reduction in your cabinet efficiency, a loss of diplomatic reputation, and much, much more. You can see an example here of what happens if it's very good. So the relative power of 62% in this example, a lot of population, high legitimacy is just giving you plus 10% bonus as well. And then all these different modifiers. This is later in the game. You can see you've stacked all these modifiers. It's really empowered the absolute ruler of your realm. And that is going to help you do certain things. It's also going to prevent you from doing some things. But again, as I said all the way through this, it depends what you're trying to do. Are you trying to make an absolute monarchy in your campaign? Are you trying to go in a different direction? Are you going to make a trade republic France or something crazy like that? There are all these different ways you can play into it as you go through your games. So they believe the concept of crown power linked with all the other systems will provide a more nuanced and challenging gameplay experience where every political decision you make will have a tangible impact on your ability to rule. And I will agree with this. I think this is much more interesting than EU4, where a lot of things you just unlock something and then clicked it and you got it. In this game, it's more about gradually shifting things in a certain direction. Yes, you can have events where things change dramatically, but if you're just playing through your general gameplay, all the little decisions that you make have big effects in the long term. So it's all about trying to guide it in a certain direction, or just having a chaos campaign where you just do whatever you want and crazy stuff could happen. So let me know what you think about this dev diary. It's been a very good overview of how a lot of these systems work and how they interact with each other, and really showing that they're all intertwined together. It's much less, as I've just said, about clicking things and getting things. It's more about the flow of your realm, the flow of your laws, getting these unlocks. That helps you do certain things, and that will also then reinforce your decisions as you progress through the game. So let me know, is there anything good you like here, anything that you don't like? What kind of feedback do you have on this? The game isn't that far away now. It's literally 2 months from today that the game is released. So it's really cool to see some more information about this, and also some condensed information. So as I said, if you're new to the game, if you've not been following the dev diaries, you can have this overview on how some of these systems work. If you do want more information, as I've said in previous videos, I covered all the dev diaries over like the last year and a half. So if you are interested in the minutiae of how some of these systems work, how some of the flavor is going to be in the game, do go back and watch my videos. There'll be a link to one of the playlists down below and you can follow along. But we'll leave it there for today. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. All the news up to the release of this game. And then I also cover Crusader Kings 3 in a very similar manner. So if you are interested in that or this game, plenty more to come in the future. But we'll leave it there for today, and I'll see you all next time.